brainstorming. That's the topic of today's video. And you know, in a video all about starting something, I think I'd have a better opening, and yet here we are. But that is the focus of the day, starting. Brainstorming is all about the steps you take to move from assignment instructions to researching. It helps you focus your paper, gives you ideas of what to research, and gets you thinking about which direction you want to take your arguments. And again, at the risk of overdoing the point, when I talk about brainstorming in this video, I'm talking about the work that you do before you start to research. You can, of course, incorporate researching into some of these strategies after you've brainstormed, and we'll touch on that. But the suggestions I'm giving today are things you can do before you've even cracked open a book. So join me as I cover some of the most common and effective brainstorming strategies I know. And cue the transition. The first brainstorming technique I want to talk about requires nothing more than a timer and a Word document, or pen and paper. It's called the free write method, and it's very simple. You set a timer for 4, 5, 6, however many minutes, and then you write. You don't stop, you don't censor yourself, you don't backspace, you don't pause and think if you're going off on a tangent, you just keep writing. Now, this isn't writing that's going to end up in your final draft, at least probably not. It's stream of consciousness. You're simply trying to get all your preliminary thoughts about the topic onto the page. Let me show you. I'm going to pull up a Word document and free write for, let's say, 25 seconds, because we want to keep this video short. 25 seconds about the family doctor crisis here in Ontario. Ready? Go. All right, so the family doctor crisis is a very real thing that is causing a lot of stress, not just to patients, but to doctors as well. The doctors aren't working because they don't have a lot of money or pay, but they also, and that is time. So when the timer goes off, stop writing. Now, you'll obviously have more than I do because you're writing for more than a few seconds, but regardless, take a moment, breathe, shake out the soreness in your hand, and then start reviewing the document you just wrote. Between the jarbled mess and the many spelling mistakes, I'm aware, look for patterns. Do you keep coming back to a similar idea, theme, person, event? Are there trends in what you talk about, ideas you want to look into more? Do you start writing about something that you want to confirm is true or explore further? Then use these patterns and loose threads to create your research questions, or at the very least, to determine the kinds of topics you want to prioritize in your researching. For the next method, we're going to shift to one that appeals to visual learners, mind maps. A mind map is very simple. Start by writing the name of your topic in the center of your page. Then, you're going to want to start making branches from the center with either information you already know or questions you have. So for the family doctor crisis topic, maybe one of the things we want to think about is which populations this crisis affects most. That would be the first branch, and then we could brainstorm some sub-branches. You could look at categories of age, young versus old, resident status, Canadian citizen versus immigrant, location, city versus rural, or socioeconomic status, and so on. Then, you can move to a second branch, in a different color for good measure. Perhaps this branch is the causes of the crisis, and you list a few causes there. And then there's a third branch, in another color, about something else. How does this crisis affect people, and so on. You can even note connections between ideas as they come up. For example, maybe you see that you listed age as one of the most affected populations, but you also think that an aging population is contributing to the crisis as a cause. Perhaps there's a relationship here, noted by a dotted line that you can look into further in your research and draw out in your paper. Because remember, at this stage, we aren't doing research yet. This is brainstorming, putting your preliminary ideas on a page, ideas you think would be worth looking into more. If you want to add specific ideas to your mind map as you research, you're welcome to, but for now, just stick with what you already know. And don't think that mind mapping is only limited to pen and paper. To avoid aging this video more than I already have, I'm not going to give specific examples, but a quick Google search of mind mapping software reveals there's loads of programs on the internet that will let you build a mind map electronically. And the best part is you don't have to worry about erasing or crossing stuff out online. If you need to add or move the bubbles to make things clearer, you can just move the data around. How convenient. So if a mind map is essentially a visual outline, now we're going to look at building a more traditional preliminary outline. And I do mean preliminary. After all, this is brainstorming, pre-research. We're not locking in an outline at this stage. We're just thinking through what could make for good paper divisions. So let's start with our basic essay structure. Every essay is going to consist of 3 parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. So at the very least, we'll write those down. Now for brainstorming, we're not going to worry too much about the intro and the conclusion, at least right now. Instead, we're going to flesh out a potential outline for the body based on the topic or question we've been given. So typically we're going to want 2 to 5 overarching sections in our essays, which will correlate to the big ideas or supporting arguments of our paper. We're going to label those as Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. Creative, I know. And now let's fill this in. So using our previous examples from the family doctor crisis, we might say Section 1 should be on who the crisis affects most. Section 2 should be focused on the causes of the crisis. And Section 3 will look at the results of the crisis. And once you have those overarching topics, now we can break them down into subtopics. We'll do that by including some bullet points to show where our brainstorming is headed. So for our first section here, we can list those 4 potential population factors we came up with earlier: age, resident status, location, and socioeconomics. There we go, that's how you spell that. And then for our second section, maybe you've done a bit of thinking and you think it basically breaks down to 2 main topics. There's historical background, the historical causes, and then there are other factors you want to highlight as well. And maybe you're not actually sure yet what the results are of the crisis. You need to do some research for that, so we're just going to leave a few blank lines for now. And don't worry, we'll cover in the next method some ways to brainstorm subpoints. Now, seeing this list, we can ask ourselves, does this order make sense? Is this the best order to cover these topics in? Granted, you might need to do some research before you can fully confirm the best order, but it's good to be thinking about now. Like here, maybe you say, oh shoot, it actually makes more sense to cover the causes of the crisis before we think about who it affects. So you can just move things around. Click and drag, or you can always just copy and paste as well. And let's just make sure that we organize this again so that it all looks the proper order. Section 2, voila. But click and drag, copy and paste to shift your outline into the most logical order for your topic. And again, this is about prediction. The beauty of this method is that you can add to your outline as you research. You can insert relevant quotes and notes to match what you brainstormed, or you can let your research change your outline entirely. You can remove topics that you think aren't relevant, or insert new arguments or subpoints as your research reveals them. But that is moving outside the scope of this video. For now, let's just stick with outlining your preliminary thinking. Though I do have one last potential tip for this method to help you from going overboard in your research. In addition to what topics I want to cover, I sometimes use these early outlines to predict approximately how many pages each of these topics will cover. So, a good rule of thumb is that your introduction and conclusion are each going to be about 1/2 to 3/4 of a page. So we can jot those down for now. We've already got our sections, so we can remove our body heading here. But what we do want to now figure out is how many pages for each section. So maybe you think the first section, the causes, is the most important piece. So that gets maybe 1/2 of your page count. In a 10-page paper, we'll say, that's going to look at around 4 to 4.5 pages. And then maybe you think the population factors is not as important, so that only needs a couple of paragraphs, and we'll call it 1 to 1.5 pages. And then the results gets the remaining amount. Maybe this is, 3 to 3.5 pages. And again, these aren't hard and fast-paced commitments, but doing this grunt work now will give you an idea of what to prioritize in the research process. Which brings us to our last method. So far, our focus has just been on writing and organizing the ideas already in our heads. But what if you don't know a lot about a topic to begin with? Or maybe you have a few ideas, but you need some more details to get things moving. That's where our journalist questions method shines. What are journalist questions? They're the 5 W's and an H. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And yes, please forgive my awful penmanship. Now the key to this method is in the name. We're trying to come up with questions. We aren't looking for answers yet. The whole point is to come up with questions that you can answer as part of your research process. Now there are two ways to do this. You can do it the boring way where you start with who and come up with questions, and then what and questions, and then where, or you can make it a game. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign each of these questions a number, starting with who for 1, what for 2, where for 3, and so on. Then we're going to roll the die, and based on what number I roll, I'm going to come up with a question about our family doctor crisis topic that matches that number. So let's try this. I'm going to try our first roll, and that gives us a 5. 5 is why. So maybe we ask the question, why did this crisis begin? Sure, okay, and now let's roll again. We'll try another one. This time we got a 3. Where? So maybe we do something like, where in Ontario is the crisis the worst? And then we can go ahead and roll it another time. And we got a 1. So maybe we say, who does this crisis affect most? Right? And then we are going to roll another time. This time we've got a 6. Man, I'm so glad this is working out. 6 is how. So maybe we ask, how can this crisis be resolved? All right, let's see here. Come on, give me another blank number. 5 again. Okay, that's fine. So for 5, we have why. We could maybe ask another why question. Why are people not becoming doctors as much? Right? So that's a good why question, and then maybe we can try a couple of more. See, now we're starting to get a lot of repeats, so I'm going to just fill in some of the other ones. Maybe for what, we have what are the symptoms of the crisis? And then let's say you rolled a 4, then we would do where, when. Yes, I am cheating, I'm getting them off screen. For 4, when, we could say, when did this crisis pick up? Now, besides the fact that these are maybe hard to read because of the screen, do you see that these questions have a certain depth to them? They aren't just, what is the topic? Rather, they ask about details and specifics, so you have something more practical than just a topic to dig into. And once you have this library of interesting questions, you can take that into your research. Instead of just throwing your topic into the library database and hoping that you find something useful, you have specific details to look for, and details that you already have established are worth considering because you're wondering about them to begin with. And even if your assignment has a more specific question already, these smaller questions can be useful for nuancing points and determining some other information to include in your paper. And that's all I've got for you today. I hope you found these brainstorming techniques helpful, and remember, this is just the beginning of the paper writing process. There's still researching, outlining, paper writing, revision, citation, and you can see videos about all of these topics on our channel. Check them out when you can, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.